Well, Frank Deford drops by now for his commentary on the pregame show. We had Tim Brown and Don McPherson as our guests, and Frank has some thoughts on the Heisman Trophy.
Bob, when President Reagan and General Secretary Gorbachev meet tomorrow, I suggest they start off this way. The General Secretary explaining how apartments are allotted in Moscow, the President explaining how the Heisman Trophy competition works. Then, with those two most ridiculously unfair things in the two societies cleared up, it'll be a piece of cake to negotiate on arms control. Now, there's no need here to belabor the fact that the Heisman competition is played out on an unlevel field. But beyond that, in no year do I know who should win, and neither do you, and neither do the voters. It's an impossibly illogical decision, choosing, say, between a quarterback in New Mexico and some running back in Virginia. Of course, none of the sports awards are scientific, but at least everywhere else, everybody has a fair shot. The Heisman is different. Too often, it's like voting for the Academy Awards without seeing any movies. The result, rancor replaces rationale. It's not Tim Brown's fault that he attended the most publicized football school in America and was on television his every game. Yet all this week he was required to defend himself as if he were some sort of male version of Jessica Hahn. Nor is it Don McPherson's fault that his team wasn't very good last year, that nobody had ever even heard of him till Armistice Day. Yet these two college athletes were turned publicly into bitter antagonists. And other contenders like Lorenzo White were encouraged to snipe from the sidelines. To use a very apt old-fashioned word, it was unseemly. The reason why the Heisman Trophy procedure must be changed is not because the wrong fellow might win some years. It's because the process has become so cynical that nobody really wins any year. Tim Brown got the most votes and must go through life protesting that he isn't a cheese champ. Don McPherson didn't get enough votes and will go through life being assured that he was cheated. The Heisman's not wrong. What it is now, it's cruel. Cruel to these young men who compete in it, and it's for their sake that the process must be changed.
Changed how?
Oh, I think there are any number of ways you can do it, probably with a two-tier system where maybe some regional experts pick a player in each area of the country, or maybe by position. Maybe if you had a quarterback and a running back and a lineman and a defensive back and so forth.
So only one from each position could even be nominated.
Exactly. Then the voters would get their shot at it, and after the season. I don't know why it has to be so early on anyhow.
As it is now, there really aren't nominees. You can vote for anybody, and the select 4 or 5 seem to emerge from some sort of consensus.
Yeah, and I think it's a thing where nobody wants to vote for the wrong guy. You hear that McPherson or Brown or whatever are in the competition, so you don't want to vote for somebody who nobody else has ever heard of. It's a foolish thing.
If you live in Los Angeles, there's very slim chance that you saw Don McPherson play this year, at least not more than once or twice.
Well, think not only of that, think of all those great quarterbacks at BYU. Never got anywhere because they played in the wrong section of the country. The regional bias is really scandalous as much as anything.
But as you pointed out, no one is saying that Tim Brown is not the best football player in the country. He might very well be.
He might well be, but the terrible thing is that he's scarred by this attitude that only because he played for great Notre Dame did he get the award. He may be the best of all time. Who knows?
It's been obvious watching McPherson and Brown together that they like one another very much, and there are absolutely no hard feelings.
Oh, no, this is people trying to make something of it. It's almost like a boxing hype before a big match, which is even worse.
On the other hand, you could say this. All right, fine. So there are occasional injustices, and the whole system is a little silly, and you've got 1,000 people balloting, and not all of them are genuine experts. But so what? It's part of the tradition of college football, and we won't take it seriously, and we'll just be happy for whoever wins, and the attention it focuses on the game is fine.
Yeah, that's great, Bob, but unfortunately nobody does that. People make too much of it. The whole part of the problem, I think, is that college football, both the team that wins and the player that wins, is based on hype. Other sports, it's based much more on reality, and champions play each other rather than are played off in the newspapers.
There's a John Wooden Award for the top college basketball player. Doesn't get nearly the attention.
I think that's because the basketball teams play each other, and they are playing each other at the time that the award is being settled.
And also because the Heisman has a longer tradition and history.
That's true, too.
Thank you, Frank. We'll be back with more as halftime activities continue here on NFL Live. Stay with us.
20-5 is the score at halftime. The Oilers leading the Chargers. Don Criqui with Bob Trumpy here at the Astrodome, and this is the play at the outset of the game that really was the difference. Bout sacked and bang in the end zone. A short time later is Mr. Lyles.
Keith Bostic, the man on the blitz. Ball bounces around between Donaldson. Lyles picks it up. Ends up being a 55-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown, and San Diego has not recovered yet. I don't know when their wake-up call was left this morning, but it was too late.
Well, Dan Fouts has been one of the great players in the National Football League for a lot of years, but you have to wonder if Coach Saunders is at this point, Trump, considering changing pitchers and going to Mark Herman.
Well, I think one of the big problems San Diego suffered in the first half is a lack of pass protection. That blitz from Houston has gotten the job done. It's at least shortened up the delivery of Dan Fouts a little bit. They've had no running game whatsoever. There's just nothing you can really talk about for San Diego that is on the plus side. They're basically sitting here right now ruining an 8-game winning streak.
Well, that 8-game winning streak was over a while ago, and then they were starting on a new one the other way. This would be their third loss in a row if they lose. It's been a series or season of really ups and downs. Lost their opener, won 8 straight, including the 3-0 strike team, and now getting beaten today. But we do have a half to play. But the fact remains, the Houston defense, with its aggressiveness and its consistent charges on Dan Fouts, has really rendered him almost ineffective.
Yeah, I don't know how tough Al Saunders can be in this ball club at halftime, but any local chalkboard that can be broken would certainly leave an impression. There's an awful lot of room to improve for San Diego in his second half, in my estimation. And one of the first things they have to do is establish some sort of running game. I mean, Houston's paying no respect to the running game whatsoever. You can see the yards rushing, just 36 yards. I mean, that's just not enough. San Diego has the weapons back there, I believe, to run the ball a little bit. This is one of the ugliest first halves I think I've ever seen played in the NFL.
Mark Herman and Dan Fouts were both warming up on the sideline. They're going to stay with Fouts.
Well, a lot has got to change here for San Diego in his second half.
He's won a lot of games in the second half in his career, Dan Fouts.
Attitude-wise, a lot has to change. Very tough to win when you have to win. And the Chargers have the best record in the AFC coming into this ball game. These guys aren't a bunch of slouches. They've played like a team with one of the worst records in the AFC in this first half.
This kickoff is sponsored by Budweiser, the king of beers.